sunshine in my pocket, got that good soul in my feet. I feel that hot blood in my body when it drops. Ooh, I can't take my eyes off it, moving so phenomenally. The room on lock, the way we rock it, so don't stop. And under the lights, when everything goes, nowhere to hide when I'm getting you close. When we move, well, you already know. So just imagine. Nothing I can see but you when you dance, dance, dance. Feel the good, good creeping up on you. So just dance, dance, dance. Come on. All those things I shouldn't do, but you dance, dance, dance. And ain't nobody leaving soon, so keep dancing. I can't stop the feeling. So just dance, dance, dance. I can't stop the feeling. So just dance, dance, dance. Come on. Ooh, it's something magical. It's in the air, it's in my blood, it's rushing on. I don't need no reason, don't need control. I fly so high, no ceiling when I'm in my zone. Cause I got that sunshine in my pocket, got that good soul in my feet. I feel that hot blood in my body when it drops. Ooh, I can't take my eyes off it, moving so phenomenally. The room on lock, the way we rock it, so don't stop, stop. And under the lights, when everything goes, nowhere to hide when I'm getting you close. When we move, well, you already know. So just imagine. Nothing I can see but you when you dance, dance, dance. Feel the good, good creeping up on you. So just dance, dance, dance. Come on. All those things I shouldn't do, but you dance, dance, dance. And ain't nobody leaving soon, so keep dancing. Come on.
Every butterfly I get belongs to you. You don't believe me, but it's true. Show the freckles on my arms, spell out your name. Real feelings coming through. 'Cause all I know and all I am is you. Ooh, yeah, all I know and all I am is you. Ooh, I'm breaking my silence, 'cause I've had a few. I just can't deny it, that all I know and all I am is you. Every time I think I'm
don't make a sound. 2 a.m. love, gotta keep it down. Don't wait around for a signal now. Give me some verb, I ain't talking down. You wanna ride in the 6, you wanna dine in the 6. But when I lean for the kiss, you said I'll probably send you some pics. And I'm like, hell nah, been waiting too long. Hell nah, I want that cruel love. Hell nah, been waiting too long. Hell nah, I want that cruel love. Body on my, losing all my innocence. Yeah, body on my, finding all my innocence. Yeah, body on my, losing all my innocence. Yeah, body on my, finding all my innocence. Yeah, body on my, losing all my innocence. Yeah, body on my, finding all my innocence. Yeah, body on my, losing all my innocence. Yeah, body on my, finding all my innocence. Yeah, on my, on my, on my, on my, yeah, on my, on my, on my, on my, yeah, on my, on my, on my, on my, yeah, on my, on my, on my, on my, yeah. Babe, just hit the pedal. If things go wrong, it's just incidental. My bad, never got the memo that you never have fun while you're in the limo. Yeah, you wanna ride in the 6, you wanna dine in the 6. And when I lean for the kiss, you said I'll probably send you some pics. And I'm like, hell nah, been waiting too long. Hell nah, I want that cruel love. Hell nah, been waiting too long. Hell nah, I want that cruel love. Body on my, losing all my innocence. Yeah, body on my, finding all my innocence. Yeah, body on my, losing all my innocence. Yeah, body on my, finding all my innocence. Yeah, body on my, losing all my innocence. Yeah, body on my, finding all my innocence. Yeah, on my, on my, on my, on my, yeah, on my, on my, on my, on my, yeah, on my, on my, on my, on my, yeah, on my, on my, on my, on my, yeah. Are you drunk enough now to judge what I'm doing? Are you high enough to excuse that I'm ruined? 'Cause I'm ruined. Is it late enough for you to come and stay over? 'Cause you're free to love, so tease me. I made no promises, I can't do golden rings, but I'll give you everything. Magic is in the air, there ain't no science here, so come get your everything. I made no promises, I can't do golden rings, but I'll give you everything. Magic is in the air, there ain't no science here, so come get your everything. Tonight.
You acting tonight?
Is it loud enough? 'Cause my body is calling for you, calling for you. I need someone to do the things that I do. I'm here now, energy taking control. I'm speeding up, my heart beats dancing alone. I made no promises, I can't do golden rings, but I'll give you everything. Magic is in the air, there ain't no science here, so come get your everything. I made no promises, I can't do golden rings, but I'll give you everything. Magic is in the air, there ain't no science here, so come get your everything. Tonight.
You acting tonight?
'Cause I need your green light, day and night. Say the trouble mine, 'cause I celebration. Celebrate good times, come on. 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 Let's celebrate. There's a party going on right here. A celebration to last throughout the years. So bring your good times and your laughter too. We gon' celebrate your party with you. Come on now, now, now. Let's all celebrate and have a good time. Time, 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 good time. Time, 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 good time.
alligator, see you later. Gotta hit the road, gotta hit the road. The sun ain't changing the atmosphere, architecture unfamiliar. I could get used to this. Time flies by in the yellow and green. Stick around and you'll see what I mean. There's a mountain top that I'm dreaming of. If you need me, you know that I'll be riding shotgun underneath the hot sun, feeling like a someone. I'll be riding shotgun underneath the hot sun, feeling like a someone. I'll be riding shotgun underneath the hot sun, feeling like a someone. I'll be riding shotgun underneath the hot sun, feeling like a someone. South of the equator, navigator, gotta hit the road, gotta hit the road. Deep sea diving round the clock, bikini bottom, lager top. I could get used to this. Time flies by in yellow and green. Stick around and you'll see what I mean. There's a mountain top that I'm dreaming of. If you need me, you know that I'll be riding shotgun underneath the hot sun, feeling like a someone. I'll be riding shotgun underneath the hot sun, feeling like a song on a song on its boom. I'll be riding shotgun underneath the hot sun, feeling like a song on. I'll be riding shotgun underneath the hot sun, feeling like a song on a song on its boom.
Surrender my everything, 'cause you made me believe you're mine. Yeah, you used to call me baby, now you're calling me by name. Takes one to know one, yeah, you beat me at my own damn game. You're pushing, I'm pulling away from you. I giving you take. Young blood, see you want me, out of your life, and I'm just a dead man walking tonight. But you need it, yeah, you need it, all of this time, yeah. Young blood, see you want me, back in the life, so I'm just a dead man walking tonight. 'Cause I need it, yeah, I need it, all of this time, yeah. Young
somewhere, any place is better. Starting from zero, got nothing to lose. Maybe we'll make something. Me, myself, I got nothing to prove. You got a fast car, I got a plan to get us out of here. I've been working at the convenience store. Managed to save just a little bit of money. Won't have to drive too far. Just across the border and into the city. You and I can both get jobs and finally see what it means to be living. You got a fast car, so fast enough so we can fly away. We're gonna make a decision. Live tonight and die this way. So I remember we were driving in your car. Speed so fast, felt like I was drunk. City lights stay out before, city all felt nice wrapped around my shoulder. And I had a feeling that I belonged. And I had a feeling that I could be someone. Had a feeling that I could be someone. Bottle, that's the way it is. Said his body's too old for working. His body's too young to look like his. Mama went off and left him. She wanted more from life than he could give. I said somebody's got to take care of him. So I quit school, that's what I did. You got a fast car. We go cruising and set outside. We still ain't got a job. Not working the market as a Chicago. I don't think will get better. You'll find work now. Get promoted. Won't move out of the shelter. Buy a bigger house and live in the suburbs. You got a fast car. We go cruising and sit outside. We still ain't got a job. Not working the market as a Chicago. I don't think will get better. You'll find work now. Get promoted. Won't move out of the shelter. Buy a bigger house and live in the suburbs.
My house in Budapest, my hidden treasure chest, golden grand piano, my beauty focus EOU. Ooh, I leave it all. My acres of land I've achieved. It may be hard for you to stop and believe, but for you, I leave it all. For you, I leave it all. Give me one good reason why I should never make a change.
My name is Tsepo Nato. I'm from the Thabo Mbeki African Leadership Institute. Thank you for hosting us. Most of you, I think I was told yesterday when I visited this building that there was a blanket, cover of darkness situation with the invite. I was surprised. So this afternoon we are hosting former President Thabo Mbeki. He will be here shortly. I'm told that he has just left the house, which is about 4 blocks from here. So, so there's no pothole on the way. When I came through, there was no accident or any other kind of disaster that will hold him back longer than necessary. Yes, I said necessary. The proceedings are very simple. There's going to be a formal program where colleagues are going to talk to us. Shubhashini will run the program, and I will then come later to moderate a conversation with the former president. What we will ask is this simple thing. I'm sure all of you, most of you know each other in this room, okay? I'm sure there are very few guests, and those guests come from UNISA, and everybody most likely is from PPS. So PPS has your bios. Huh? So PPS has your CVs and your bios. So when you rise to ask a question, could you just please simply say, "My name is Tsepo Nato," and we will deal with your bio later and ask a question. Is that fair? Yeah, no, we can speak to HR to make it available for the rest of us, so that we are more familiar with your life story. We are keenly interested in your life story, but because you want as many people as possible to ask a question, please limit your intros. And second is the questions that we ask. Sometimes we have a lot of history and background to a question, okay? We appreciate those two also, history and backgrounds. If you can limit it to 15 seconds, On radio they say maximum 30 seconds voice notes. Don't they say that? They do. I'm sure you can manage 15 seconds background info on your question and get to the point. Because most of us have sat in this room for the last hour waiting. And I'm sure we don't want to be robbed of an opportunity to interact with the former president, whether you're asking me about history, current affairs, or the future. So most of us will be interested in the past, some in current affairs, and most of you are scenario planners. Your work is futuristic and all of that. You're concerned about the future of the country, the continent, and the world, and so you want to ask those type of questions. So I'm helping you to help us manage you, or else colleagues are going to throw. There's not anything to throw in here, I'm sorry. So can you do that for each other? Any questions? Any? I can take a question quickly. There are many bios out there about Mbeki. So there's nothing really personal that you can ask him, because there are bios out there you can go read. Is that fair? A couple of years ago, somebody stood up to ask a very serious question, and that question was, can we have tea? Yes. That question was not helping anybody else except the person who asked to have a tea session. Okay? Thank you very much for your attention. So those are the basic ground rules. We don't have ground rules on what to ask and not to ask. He enjoys open discussions on any questions. He's a politician. Some of them he'll creatively manage them. But feel free to ask any question you want. On 15 August, we had a session at UNISA. We had a question on gender mainstreaming, femicides, immigration, xenophobic attacks, and so forth. Policy, whether it's possible for a government to implement policy in 5 years, successfully implement policy in 5 years, and so forth. So in the past, we dealt with Burundi, Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is a permanent feature. So I'm just saying, allow yourself to think creatively, be bold, and ask your questions. Have I made you comfortable enough? Okay. I think when I come back, he will be coming in the room, and we will start the proceedings. Thank you very much for paying attention.
Once again, my name is Lebogang Tsotetse and I'm part of PPS. So Tepo took the opportunity to give a bit of ground rules regarding the engagement today, but I would like to stress a few things. We would like to collaborate with you today. So if you want to connect with us, please do so. We are PPS for Professionals. That's on Facebook. On Twitter, it's at PPS_SA. Instagram, it's PPS_for_professionals. What would we be without the underscore, guys? And on YouTube, this is where we're live streaming. We are PPS for Professionals. LinkedIn, professional platform. We encourage you to connect and link up with us and communicate and tag and share anything that you have from this moment. We are just simply PPS. If you get lost, that logo will direct you to the correct pages. And because, like I said, we are co-creating, so with our fellow esteemed guests from the Timali organization and institute, rather, they are Timali UNISA on Twitter. And then it's the Thabo Mbeki African Leadership Institute, both on Facebook and LinkedIn. So the ground rules are as follows. We encourage everyone to interact, but what we would like from you is to minimize any kind of use of cell phone during the engagements because we want you to be fully engaged. You can take pictures, you can take videos and share those moments on social media, but also be mindful of the people who will be delivering their speeches on here. In a couple of seconds, the esteemed guest will join us and we will start the proceedings. Thank you very much. Don't forget the hashtag. How can I forget the hashtag? It is leading the PPS way. If you've got the band, it will remind you. We've got the writing right on there, leading the PPS way. And another one is Thabo Mbeki at PPS. Thank you very much.
one little thing, and it's not a major thing. So I don't know what the culture is at PPS when a guest gets into the room. What's the protocol here? You do? Oh no, no, I don't want to be forward. So we encourage you to do that. And any other thing that is appropriate for the moment. That. You see, when I came here, I was wearing an African print shirt. If you remember, those of you who came here about an hour ago. So I felt out of place. So I did what needed to be done to fit in to, yeah, who's at HR here? I must speak to you so that you can sort out an office for me. Because I fit in now. So I'm going to go back as promised. So my promise was delayed with this announcement. So I'm going to go back. When I come back, that thing that we've just agreed on, we will do it. Okay? Thanks.
Team. Now I think the proceedings can start. So because our guest of honor has been revealed, I will ask you, who do you think said the following quotes? South Africa belongs to all those who live in it, black and white. Okay. Secondly, we will continue to count on your unwavering support and commitment to working with leaders of our continent in bringing about the desired renaissance of Africa. Who said that? Thabo Mbeki. All right. How does this sound? Does it sound familiar? It's coming.
I am an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts, the trees, the flowers, the seas, and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of our native land. My body has frozen in our frosts and in our latter-day snows. It has thawed in the warmth of our sunshine and melted in the heat of the midday sun. The crack and the rumble of the summer thunders, lashed by startling lightning, have been a cause both of trembling and of hope. The fragrances of nature have been as pleasant to us as the sight of the wild blooms of the citizens of the veld. The dramatic shapes of the Drakensberg, the soil-colored waters of the Likwa, Iqeli, Notugel, and the sands of the Kalahari have all been panels of the set on the natural stage on which we act out the foolish deeds of the theater of the day. At times, and in fear, I have wondered whether I should concede equal citizenship of our country to the leopard and the lion, the elephant and the springbok, the hyena, the black mamba, and the pestilential mosquito. A human presence among all of these, a feature on the face of our native land just defined, I know that none dare challenge me when I say I am an African. I am the grandchild of the warrior men and women that incense the Kukuni land. Patriots at Tetwayo and Mpepu took to battle. The soldiers Mushweshwe and Ngumunyane taught never to dishonor the cause of freedom. I am the child of Nongause. I am he who made it possible to trade in the world markets in diamonds, in gold, in the same food for which our stomachs yearn. Being part of all of these people, and in the knowledge that none dares contest that assertion, I shall claim that I'm an African. Today, it feels good to be an African.
And isn't that true? Doesn't it feel good to be an African? I think while we wait for Tsepo, it's time for us to reflect and just to prepare ourselves mentally for the engagement and the interactive session that we're going to have today. By way of introduction, I said I am Lebogang Tsotezi, and I am proudly PPS. This is an honor because we have been given the opportunity to engage with a formidable and prolific leader who has made his strides in the South African context. And he looks and he speaks about Africa and its people very proudly. Let me just remind you once again, the hashtags for today, hashtag leading the PPS way. Secondly, Thabo Mbeki at PPS. We are the Professional Providence Society, an organization that was formed on the basis of mutuality and ethos of mutuality. I'm part of the Young Leadership Forum, and I'll speak on it about it a bit later on. So let me just give you a glance of what I have been tasked to do. The integration of young people into key strategic leadership roles is essential for sustainable economic development and the survival of Africa. This is an excerpt from a 2018 article written by an alumnus of the Institute that has been very instrumental and a chief contributor of today's interactive forum. But let me pause it right there because I have gotten the indication that the person that we've been waiting for is about to make his way into the room. As we all stand, may we please all stand. Ladies and gentlemen, shall we put our hands together for the former president and his delegation?
Yeah.
Just 1 second. May we please take our seats? Thank you very much. I think we can get the show on the road. The energy has been high. We have been waiting for this delegation to join us, and we are very excited. And I would like to start from the top to mention how the integration of young people into key strategic leadership roles is essential for the sustainable economic development and the survival of Africa. This is an excerpt from a 2018 article written by an alumnus from the Institute that has been instrumental and a chief contributor of today's interactive forum. That's Timali, for those who may not know. The co-creator of this engagement is what we proudly know and call the Home of Graduate Professionals, an organization that has been built on the ethos of mutuality. So the quote I made reference of in the beginning is that it can be brought back home because over the past 2 years, at PPS we have seen the integration of young people into informal and formal roles. This is leadership roles, that is. This is where we have been encouraged to take an active part in the advancement from a personal and professional stance and the advancement of the organization at large. A vivid memory that I can share is of a particular event that speaks to this very idea. And this is where you, Mr. Isaac Smith, as the CEO of PPS Group, come in. Do you remember, Isaac, how towards the end of 2018, when the cohort from our graduate internship development program pitched an idea that is the essence of empowering the youth within the organization, while plans to drive our vision for 2022 were in motion, the interns proposed that a junior executive committee be appointed to challenge existing paradigms and help advance new thinking. We are very progressive, that I must say. The thinking behind the proposal is commendable because a few months later, this particular project was actioned. And I stand here today as one of the 12 members who form part of this committee called the Young Leadership Forum. My colleagues are sitting on the third row and across the room. Hi to you guys. A group of young thought leaders from across the PPS group who have been mandated to contribute to the vision and bring about change in the communities in which we exist and operate. This speaks to three things I've noted over time. The youth have a voice, a role to play in various communities in South Africa, in Africa, and in the globe. Secondly, while standing true to the huge component of the company's vision and what Isaac has encouraged us all to commit to, which is being a leader. If I recall correctly, Isaac, you stress how leadership should exist in all pockets of the business and how it has nothing to do with the job title. Lastly, while it may take time for them to get off the ground, similar to the proposal by the interns, your ideas are valid and they have a place. Some of us in this room have had the opportunity to have our mental capacity stretched and learn of ways that we can contribute to Africa's new renewal and implement these ideas across the length and breadth of our beloved continent. Here at PPS, we also have a chance to be exposed to platforms like Leaders with Following, whose purpose is to have industry mavens impart skills and knowledge to PPS employees and drive home the idea of purposeful and servant leadership. This is an extension of a saying that our CEO Isaac holds dear. Anyone from any circumstance can be a leader. Former President Thabo Mbeki, the delegation from the Thabo Mbeki African Leadership Institute, and UNISA, PPS leaders. Yes, every single one of you seated in this room and engaging with us, regardless of your location. And all esteemed guests, it gives me great pleasure to introduce and call onto the stage PPS Group CEO, Mr. Isaac Smith.
Lebo have mentioned a couple of things that I want to mention in my little short welcome. How important leadership everywhere is. Lebo, thank you. It's my pleasure today, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome all of you here today, but of course a few people in particular. First of all, the chairman of our Holdings Trust Board, Dr. Sybil Siauka, thanks for, I know you had another appointment very far from here this morning. We appreciate you coming through. Then obviously our guests from UNISA, Professor Kamga, who is the Associate Professor responsible for the Thabo Mbeki African Leadership Institute. To all of you, but then last but most importantly, to former President Thabo Mbeki. It is indeed a very, very big privilege and an honor to welcome you to PPS today. A couple of words just on PPS for our UNISA guests here today. There are two things that make us very unique at PPS. The first one is, of course, our commitment to mutuality. So we're a mutual. Everything that we do is for our members. We don't have shareholders. It makes my job a lot easier not to worry about that stakeholder. Everything always for our members. That's the first one. And of course, the second one, our absolute focus on a very narrow segment, and that is the professionals in our country. And to work with this segment, to work with professionals, of course, you need very, very special people. It's not anybody who can serve professionals, and for special people you also need a very special culture. And if we talk about the culture that we have here at PPS, there's especially three things that stands out. The first thing is it's a lot about that word that Lebo has mentioned, leadership, ownership. So as I always say, and she has said it, We need all of us to be leaders all the time. Some of us do have management jobs, and of course a big part of management is leadership. There's a big overlap indeed. But you don't need a title to be a leader. Everybody can be a leader. I think today probably most of us had opportunities to exercise leadership. Maybe it was at home with our kids. Maybe it was in the traffic driving here. Lots of opportunities to exercise leadership. Of course, in the work environment, we can be leaders. Yeah, that is we encourage that. Don't need a title, all of us. And that is for us then a privilege also today, of course, and in future to partnership with the Thabo Mbeki African Leadership Institute. Second part of our culture is about learning, staying curious. A learning organization. Now, Lebo has mentioned Vision 2022. Like most organizations, you look at the future, where you want to be. When we look forward to 2022, we say our brand must really be aspirational. Those who are eligible, professionals, must want to join us, a community of this very special community. And for it to be aspirational, that means you are also a leader as far as your products and your solutions are concerned. And to be that, you need to be very curious. You always have to want to learn and to make it better. So curiosity, learning is a big part of our culture. And talking about learning, that is where our academy at PPS comes in. In financial services, one of the very big differentiators, of course, people want to develop our people, want to make them better, and our academy is almost like our secret sauce. It's that thing, that very special thing that helps us all to be better people in December than what we have been in January, always to keep developing. And the Academy runs a couple of programs, but one of the most important ones is the graduate program that we run every year, where every year about plus minus 30 people recently completed their studies at universities. They join us as graduates, and we take them through a wonderful program that Subhashini and the team has for them, and many of them, after that year, they stay on because they make themselves indispensable in various roles, and they join us as colleagues. Now, it was, as Lebo has said, last year they said, man, one of the suggestions was, can we not have this junior exco, this young leadership forum? And I shared with former President Mbeki earlier, I said, I was so excited about this young leadership program because obviously I wanted to join it. Because I'm a young person, right side of, what's it now, 55. And they said, sorry, Isak, no, sorry, you don't make the cut. You need to actually be younger than 30, I think it is, to join this. But this young leadership forum of us, that is what we really enjoy, to get the views of the youngsters. And for us to almost be mentored by them is very important when they talk about these different generations, These days, young people coming in is what they call them the millennial generation, and we really want their views, and we treasure that. And then the third and the last piece of our culture at PPS is all about caring, and that links back to mutuality, which is what we are all about. Really, really caring very deeply for our members, doing the right things every day, and that is who we are at PPS. So a little bit about ourselves, but I think I should stop it there. You're not here to listen to me, certainly not. So once again, a very, very warm welcome to our UNISA guests and to former President Mbeki, making time in his very busy diary to share with us a couple of thoughts today. So to all of you, a warm welcome. Thank you.
Isak, thank you for that. What you said about leadership playing a very big role in our culture really resonated with me, as it proves to show that us as millennials really have a platform to make the impact that matters. Good afternoon, ladies and gents. My name is Lamise Kaji, and I am one of the 2019 graduates at PPS. On behalf of myself and my fellow grads, we are proud to be part of PPS. a company that truly values the importance that the youth play within their organization. As we speak, our group is actually working on a project aligned with the goals of Vision 2022, which we will present to Exco later on in the year. As a young woman, it is such an honor to be hosting former statesman Mr. Thabo Mbeki and his delegation from the Thabo Mbeki African Leadership Institute. Through the graduate program, we had the privilege to do a course on thought leadership for Africa's renewal with the Institute, which is one of the courses facilitated by Professor Sergis Kamga, who I have the pleasure of introducing to you today. I would like to share a story with the audience. When we had a contact session with Tamali for the course, a fellow graduate argued that, as Africans, we do not have that many opportunities at our feet, to which our lecturer responded, "The change is up to us to make." And that truly embodies thought leadership. Think about it. It brings me great excitement to introduce our next speaker, who is an associate professor at Tamale. His extensive background in human rights law at the University of Pretoria and University of Texas is profound. He is a member of the Building Committee of the Cross-Cultural Human Rights Center, a consortium of 1 European university, 10 Chinese universities, and 4 African universities. One of his aims is to bring Southern ideas and concepts in human rights to Northern audiences. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Sergis Kamga.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to start by thanking the patron, former President Thabo Mbeki, for finding time to be with us today, because it's not easy. He's extremely busy, as some of you can imagine. So we are very pleased, patron, that you could come today to be with us at PPS. I'd also like to greet Mr. Smith and his team at PPS, and I will especially greet the students of PPS that I've been working with over the past years. And I want to tell you that the patron is here because of the good job that you have been doing. If you were not a good audience, I'm very sure we were not going to recommend that you have the patron here today to speak to you. And I would like to start by saying today I'm standing on behalf of Dr. Edith Paswana, who is the acting head of Timali, and she is currently out of office, out of the country. She could not be here with us. She's in China on an office assignment. So today, and she sent her apology, and I'm standing here on her behalf. What I will do in the 15 minutes I have, my talk will be in 3 points. What is Timali? What we do at Timali? And how we do it. And in the how we do it, we will have a brief overview of the program. And my knowledge of Timali, and we are fortunate to have the patron who can also add to that in case I forget something. Not to put him on the spot. But Timali, the idea of Timali did not appear with the Institute. When I joined Timali in 2012, I asked the question during my interview, why Timali? And then I want to share that answer with you today. I was told then by the late Ambassador Kumalo, who was then the CEO, he said to me, look, when the patron was still in office, he experienced what I call today the African paradox. The fact that the continent is very rich, but African people are very poor. That is the paradox. And in the patron view, the problem, in his view, there was a problem of leadership in Africa. And the leadership is not only political. It's in the private sector, it's in community, it's in the business sector and other sectors. So the question then was, what can we do about this? And a few years after he left office, his team was reflecting on what to do. So they said it was important to establish a leadership institute on the continent. And there were many takers in terms of universities. And I will say UNISA was then selected to host the institute. And why UNISA? Because UNISA is a university that shaped the future of humanity, but importantly, because UNISA has a global reach, has a continental reach. And the institute, I will tell you, we are a Pan-African institute, and that it sees from our staff. We have people from virtually everywhere in the institute, on the continent. So we try to live up to the expectation of having people coming from various places and work with us as researchers, as professors. We have Nigerians, Zimbabweans, former Cameroonians, and the like. So we have a diversity, a mixture of people, and we try to have gender balance at the Institute. Now, to achieve the objective, what we do to achieve our objective of training thought leaders, Timali will use a multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary approach to studies. And we will basically be ensure that our discussion cut across disciplines. That's why we can be in business, we can be in other parts of social sciences, every center of knowledge, Timali will be present. In this context, what we do, we interrogate various theories and concepts and epistemologies and question their appropriateness for African development. At Timali, we also do community engagement, academic citizenship. We conduct research and publishing. And in terms of research, I am very happy to say that at Timali, currently, we have 2 NRF researchers who are rated researchers out of 4 internal staff that we have, because we also use rated researchers by the government of South Africa. So, and it's an achievement on its own because you have huge faculty of 20 with nobody who is rated. So we have that. In terms of publications, since 2006, now we are counting 21 books. I'm not mentioning book chapters and articles. And this is by 4 people, 21 books, and under what we call the Timali book series. So all this work is simply to tell you that at Timali, we are kind of trying to shape what we would like leadership to be in Africa. And in doing this, we've adopted our programs in the form of short learning programs where you have thought leadership for Africa's renewal, you have the course on public policy analysis for Africa's development, the African feminism and gender studies, African political economy, African international trade, good governance in Africa. We are also supervising MA, Masters, and PhD studies currently. We, at Timali, we have also, to ensure that everyone can access what we do, we've now developed what we call the Timali Pan-African Master Classes. That will take 4 to 5 days. And these classes will basically be tailored to respond to current problems. Recently, we have problems of xenophobic attacks or crime attack, whatever we want to call it. We, in the context of our master classes, we could develop such courses just for 4 days to enable those who cannot be in class for 6 months and beyond to be part of the conversation. So this is briefly to let you know that for the student, you are studying at the right place, and that for Africa to develop, you need to be part of the conversation, and Timali offers you the platform to do so. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Prof. He's being very, very modest. He's one of the 2 professors he mentioned, NRF-rated professors. The second one is sitting on my right. Professor Olorontoba, please stand up so that colleagues can see you. I used to caution them from drinking too much Red Bull because they are very industrious colleagues who work late in the night in the office over weekends. When you pass via the office on Sundays, you find these 2. And we are grateful. 21 books since 2016 is not a small measure. It's great production. On top of that is many, many articles that they have published. We're now going to move to the second phase of our session this afternoon, and I'm going to ask Natembeki to join me on stage. I'm going to ask Prof to join me on stage, Mr. Smith to join me on stage, and Mama Semola to come join me on stage.
Oh yeah, thanks. No, it's a word we sit.
You're seated properly. The right seats. You're at the right seats. That moment has arrived, as I indicated earlier, and I think Prof. Kamba is right. Timali exists to provoke thinking, to provoke the type of thinking that is unusual in South Africa, to provoke the type of thinking that is unusual on the continent and even in the world, to question conventions, to question those things that we consider normal, to question why the conditions that we live through are what they are. How does Africa move from where it is to achieve what we know it is its potential? From South Africa to the tip of the continent, Africa is rich with minerals, people, resource-rich continent, but its peoples are poor. This afternoon, we're going to use this opportunity to ask questions, as I said earlier. There will be roving mics, and I'm going to take a few questions, I think 4 questions in the first round. And then we will then allow Natembeki to respond. And then we'll take, if time allows, we'll take more rounds and have more conversation. But before we go before I note hands, Natembeki, would you like to make comments or straight to questions?
No thanks.
No thanks. Great. Hands, please. Okay. I have 2 hands in front, 1 hand here, and 1 hand at the back. So, all male round of hands. So I'm going to make the second round of questions to be females, women in the room. Please prepare your questions. The 2 gentlemen in front.
Good afternoon. My name is Lohodi Sioka, and I've been thinking about this question for some time, and I hope I can put it across as eloquently as it deserves. In the past years, we've seen the rampant rise of populism in the politics of our northern neighbors. In previous years, in previous times, to my understanding, it's been the mainstay of primarily poor nations where people's innate divisions can be exploited. Today, we have a serious issue with issues like gender-based violence, xenophobia, or racism, as I like to call it. What do you think is truly behind this rise in populism? And what can we do to stem, to prevent its global reach, really? Thanks.
You might have to explain that. No, because it's an assumption that I recognize, you've recognized populism, and you're asking why. And you expect an answer from me. The assumption of that is that I've also recognized the rise of populism. But have I? That's why I'm saying it needs a bit of an explanation. What is populism? Even that. How have you understood it? I'm asking you the questions in order to empower myself to answer you.
I didn't program this path. For me, the populism is when any kind of demagogue, any kind of person who's blessed with the gift of speech and the ability to sway the minds of people uses the basest of human kind of instinct. It's our fear of otherness. And our fear of otherness will drive us to do things that may, in some cases, harm ourselves. So when I say the rise of populism, it is when people will stand up and say to their citizens that immigrants are bad. People will say that people with different sexual orientations are bad. People will say that people who don't look like them are bad. And they can get that groundswell of emotion going to a point that they can uplift themselves into positions of power. And I think that's my definition of populism.
Hi there, Quentin Augustine. My question relates to, it's been said many times that education is the ultimate equalizer. And our leader, Isaac Smith, very often comes to us with many interesting books that we should read. And I thought, if I get the opportunity to speak to an ex-president, it's a very simple question. What books do you read? And perhaps give us a sense of some of the profound books that you read and how it influenced your life.
Good afternoon. My name is Fusiso. I'm a tech enthusiast, and whenever my mom has a challenge with her smartphone or anything, I'm the person that she calls. And I've just looked at it, and 2/3 of the workforce are over the age of 30. And I just wonder that as a young professional, looking at the fourth industrial revolution in the next 10 years or so, things are going to be disrupted, but most of these people are still going to be productive for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So what role can I play in terms of swaying that, the same as I do at home on a national level, and how do I formalize that?
The last question is at the very back.
My name is Zizwe Mbata, patron of Timali, Tata Thabo Mbeki. Yesterday you actually mentioned that the late former president, Robert Mugabe, was actually an African patriot. Now my question is how important it is that in the context of leadership, that when we look at leadership, we create a narrative or we actually try and put a true African narrative forward in the context of how our African leaders lead and the actions that they take, especially in the later years during their leadership.
Great. Patron, I don't know.
It's okay.
You can sit or you can maybe...
No, it's okay. It's better here. We were in not in Cape Town. We were here in Johannesburg a few months back. In fact, a year back. When there was a discussion about technology and education and knowledge. And I was asked to come to participate in this discussion. Indeed, we went and sat there for 2-3 hours, listening to very educated people talking about this matter. And so they asked me to speak at the end, which I did, essentially to say that I had not understood them at all. Truly, and that was my honest response, because what they spoke about really went over my head. And therefore requested that why don't we do something about that? Because I said to them that, I'm a chancellor of the University of South Africa, of UNISA, and the biggest college at the university is the Education College. So UNISA produces, I think, something like 60% of the teachers, new teachers being trained in the country. So that particular college, therefore, at UNISA becomes of particular importance with regard to this matter. Technology, education, and so on. And I was saying to them that having listened to them to the extent that I could understand anything, if I went back to UNISA and said to them, look, this matter about technology and education is important, do something about it. And they would ask me a question, do what? Mr. Chancellor. And the Chancellor would not be able to answer that question. So I said to them, look, why don't we then work on this? Because I know, for instance, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg has been talking about this, the importance of introducing at universities proper courses on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. He was raising exactly the same point that has been raised, that you've got new people coming in, new younger generations who are going to be, who are born more or less into this period of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And if you don't empower them, there's going to be problems. Somebody was telling me the other day that there's some very smart person who says he wants to take out a legal case against a number of training institutions, because they are training people today for jobs which are going to be non-existent in 3 years and 5 years' time. And he was saying that's a criminal offense. So we agreed with that group of people that we were with a year ago to say, let's work then on something. How do you educate all of us, the young and the old, into this Fourth Industrial Revolution? Unfortunately, there's a very, very knowledgeable people responded, and we had a meeting in Cape Town last week where they handed over the result of their work. It's a 200-page report on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It relates to education and training, and therefore the preparation of various generations in terms of mastery of this technology, so that then indeed you don't have somebody, as was indicated, who might be left behind in this regard. And I think it's the first comprehensive presentation in this country on that matter. Now the authors said, they gave me a copy. They said, you asked us to do this work, we've done it, here is a copy. 200 pages, I haven't read it. But they then said they are going to post it on the Thabo Mbeki Foundation website. I don't know if it's been posted yet. But elsewhere, because it's going to be I'm trying to respond to the question that was posed. It's going to be a very important engagement. This one, because indeed this fourth industrial revolution is with us. It will be disruptive. It is disruptive of many things. But to master the technology, therefore, means to be able to adapt to that disruption in a manner that is productive. As a foundation, we are beginning next year, January, beginning of the school academic year. We are going to be introducing, it's a trial project, tablets at 50 schools in Mpumalanga and the Eastern Cape, rural schools. This is because of the argument that given the impact of this technology on society, even children at primary school need to grow up being familiar with this technology, that they don't come across computers when they are wherever, that they get educated into this kind of technology from the beginning. So we, fortunately, with the support of some important foundations in Europe, they've agreed we'll go together. I'm saying we're trying a trial project with 50 rural schools, some of which, if they don't have electricity, might need solar panels and things like that. But in the end, to aim at reaching 1 million children, so that we really begin from there and not only deal with the fourth industrial revolution technology education at university, but introduce this thing throughout the system. So that's what needs to happen. I hope that answers the question. Your mother, if she's listening, would have an opportunity then not only to depend on you, but she can also study for herself, to empower herself. Now books. I read many books about many things. In part because many authors send me books. In the last 3 weeks, I've received 3 books. I don't know the authors, but they send the books anyway, and with inscriptions, which obliges me to read the book because there must be a reason why the authors think I need to read the book. And I can only find that thing out after reading the book. So I have to read many books. But obviously books are important. Because I think when we're talking leadership, I think a first requirement of leadership surely must be an understanding of the reality with which you are dealing. As correct and truthful and objective an understanding of the reality you are dealing with rather than an imagined reality. I think that's your first starting point. It doesn't matter what the issue is. That understanding becomes important, therefore books become important. One of the books I'm about to finish now is a small book. It's not quite related to what I've just said, but it's one of these books which I get from the authors. Now this one is from a niece of mine, and she has just got a doctorate at the Free University in Amsterdam. And she decided to study the impact of nutrition on the slaves that were imported into the Cape from the 17th, 18th, so on centuries. Now, in the slaves, so she talks about the slaves, they came from Malaya, they came from Indonesia, they came from what is Sri Lanka today, from Madagascar, from Mozambique. And why she decided on this topic, I don't know. But it was, when she told me, I thought it was a very interesting idea. The impact of nutrition on slaves in the 17th and 18th century. How are you going to study that? The poor slaves are dead. But she did, because then they have to do tests on the bones and look at the molars and this and that and the other. Very fascinating story. I'm not talking about the scientific part of it. I skip those pages. It's the historical part, when she says they came from here, they were like this, and so on. But that's an aside. Some years back, we hosted the former president of Haiti, President Aristide, for a number of years. Haiti, you'd recall, became independent in 1804. It was called the First Black Republic because it was the result of a rebellion of the slaves against France, against Napoleon. And the French, Napoleon sent an army to Haiti to suppress the slave uprising, and the slaves defeated that army. And Haiti became independent beginning of 1804. So 2004 was the bicentenary of the liberation of Haiti. So we discussed this matter at the African Union. That is a very important occasion for us as Africans, and it will be important that we join the Haitians as they celebrate that bicentenary. So let's all go. Agreed? We all agreed. But as it happens, there were only 2 delegations that participated in those celebrations. It was ourselves and traditional leaders from Benin. And the reason for the traditional leaders from Benin is because a lot of the slaves that ended up in Haiti originally came from what is now Benin. The rest of my colleagues did not come. It was very restive at the time. There were people who were very determined to overthrow the government of President Aristide. So even while we were there, there was shooting taking place in various parts of the island. And then President Aristide said, look, there's agitation against the government. We are willing to have, I'm willing to have early elections. Secondly, I'm willing to reconstitute the Electoral Commission. so that even the opposition parties are satisfied about how it is composed, and therefore have these early elections and let the matter be decided like that. And then he asked me, he said, can you therefore please speak to the opposition to tell them that. So indeed, meeting of the opposition was convened, and we told them that President Aristide agrees with your demand there must be early elections. Number two, agrees that the Electoral Commission must be reformed so that everybody is satisfied about this composition. And therefore, you people must enter into negotiations between yourselves and the government. In the end, they agreed. The political parties first, and then they insisted that we should then also meet civil society organizations because they would have to be taken on board. We did that, and the matter was agreed by, therefore, the government, the opposition, political parties, civil society, that they would get together and negotiate this agreement. That was January 2004. February 2004. So we left Haiti, and the matter was going to be handled by Jamaica, was going to chair the negotiations, and we would act in support of Jamaica. So we left, came home. And then sometime in February 2004, the US ambassador in Pretoria calls me to say he'd like to see me, so I see him. And he says to me, I have a message from Washington. And the message is that President Aristide wants to leave office and come to South Africa. No, he just now awaits the permission of the South African government to therefore take off from Haiti. That conflict I was saying, which was there already in January, had intensified. So he wants to leave to come to South Africa. So I said, Ambassador, just give me and his agent. Washington says matter is urgent. I said, give me some time, let me reflect on it. I'll come back to you. So I contact some of the prime ministers in the Caribbean to say, but what is the story that I'm told by the Americans about President Aristide wants to abdicate? And they say, no, they don't know anything about that. So then I go back to the American ambassador because I was going to say to him, well, nobody in the Caribbean knows anything about President Aristide leaving. And number two, normally he would contact me if he wanted to come to South Africa. So the ambassador, he starts off, when I get through to him, he starts off by laughing. And then he apologized. He said, no, President, I apologize, but I'll explain why. No need for you to explain. President Aristide has already left Haiti. And he says, the reason I'm laughing is because he's not coming to South Africa. He's going to the Central African Republic. So I say, Ambassador, how does Aristide get there? He says, well, that's why I'm laughing, because a very, very odd thing that he would leave and go there. When we found out later that they had been called, the government in the Central African Republic had been called by the president of France to say, you must receive Aristide. And what had happened is that Aristide was taken and they put him on a plane, the Americans, and they flew him to the Central African Republic. So in the end, that's how Aristide ended up here. Now, the reason I'm telling you this long story, it's about books. There the political party of President Aristide in Haiti is called Famille Lavalas. It's Creole, Haitian, but it means the flood. An American historian, then 2004, I think, published a book called Damming the Flood. Damming meaning to build a dam. Damming the Flood. It's about what had happened in Haiti. So you read this book and discover that what we're trying to do in Haiti in January 2004 was a complete waste of time. Because the very same people were sitting with negotiating that they must enter into negotiations with President Aristide to have early elections, Those same people were talking to the Americans who had already decided to remove Aristide by force. So we are praising ourselves as we flew home to say there will be peace and negotiations. It's completely false. Unfortunately, the book came after Aristide had already been removed. But when you read the book, you came to understand the reality of Haiti. If we had had an understanding of that reality before, we might have intervened in a different way. So that's what I'm saying. And give an example of the importance of books and why I read books. There are a number of books just currently now. We know all of us here are aware that the South African economy is very sickly. And so a couple of books have come out, books and booklets on the economy, which one has to read. Because we've got to answer the question, what do we do about this economy? I don't know to what extent these particular books reflect this thing I'm talking about, an objective reality of South Africa, so that by the time you say this is what needs to be done, it's based on a proper understanding of what's happening in the country. I don't know if they do that, but they have to be read for that purpose. The matter about populism, wherever populism occurs, this is my view, wherever populism occurs, it's a demonstration of political bankruptcy. It would normally be a populist stance. It would be taken by somebody who is not in reality interested in solving any problem. They might take a populist position in order to advance their own personal interests. That's why personally, instinctively, I get very worried about the superlatives describing situations. Now, when you say such and such a country is the crime capital of the world, I worry about that. Because my suspicion is that whoever makes that statement has actually not studied crime statistics of 190 countries. They haven't. They have an impression, maybe, or they have an objective to pursue, and therefore will say things like that. But I'm trying to say that populism, in my view, is indeed a reflection of that. A political bankruptcy, which has nothing to do with solving whatever the issues that are being raised, whether it's matters of gender violence or crimes of xenophobia or anything of these sorts. I think it would be the responsibility of certainly any progressive movement to want to stand up against that populism. I get into problems. I have been getting into problems for some time. When I've tried to resist this notion that we as South Africans are xenophobic, I say I don't agree. And I give an example, for instance, of taking an old township here in Johannesburg, Alexander Township. Alex is 100 years old plus. And for many, many years, many of those 100 years, you've had people there coming from Mozambique, from Zimbabwe, from all around. It's the way the South African economy developed. The mining industry which attracted these people. So we've had these African populations from outside of the borders of South Africa for very many, many years. My wife comes from Alexander. And she says, but we always lived with all these people. You get, for instance, in Durban, there's a group of people there in Durban who are called Amazinzimbane. They're people from Zanzibar, but they call them Amazinzimbane. Who've lived there and nobody's ever attacked them or anything like that. So I say, even the instances where you get these attacks, like what happened now, last week here, or if it was last week, here in the Johannesburg Metro and Ekurhuleni. I read, for instance, a report that one of the attacks in Springs, it's in the media here, people were offloaded by bus. They were brought by bus to come and attack some shop. It's not an instinctive thing, a spontaneous thing from people in the township who then get up and say, because we hate these ones, we're going to attack them. Somebody hires a bus, collects people, delivers them, they attack, they are collected by bus and taken away. That's organized. Judge Niva Pillay. You know, these attacks took place in Durban, I think around 2015. And they asked the government there, Judge Niva Pillay, to set up a commission under her to look at this matter. What happened? It was exactly the same thing. In that case, it was the South African traders. In order to get rid of their competition, they organized this thing and then blame all of us for being xenophobic. It was entirely a business arrangement. So I'm saying an understanding of the objective reality becomes important. The use of populism as slogans, I think is very dangerous. And whoever resorts to that populism, I think they're making a negative statement about themselves. I think it's people that we ought to say, we don't want to have anything to do with populists. That would be my view. Our colleague at the back there was asking a question about African leadership. And he said something about, as these leaders are getting old. I thought he was talking about myself. Even that, you see, there are obviously some things there which are not right on the continent. for instance, this phenomenon, which we've tried to oppose, of people perpetuating themselves in power. You remember that historically what's happened here on the continent is as the countries became independent around 1960, thereabouts, many countries become independent. Not long after, you started having military coups. Lots and lots of military coups. Then the democratization process kicks in around the 1990s. And so all of these processes, including South Africa and so on. So you then see that what happens during that democratization process during the 90s, a lot of the constitutions will give two-term limitations. And this was not necessarily because it's particularly democratic to have two terms. There are many democratic countries in the world which have no terms. The UK and the Germans and, you know. But the reason the continent took that position was out of the experience we had had with the military coups, that it would be better, given our historical experience, that we limit the time when people sit in positions of leadership, hence the two-term limitations. I think it was a correct decision, certainly in our context. So therefore, we have generally opposed people trying to remove those limitations, because they end up with that perpetuation of people in positions of power. I'm saying there are wrong things like that are happening. But, of course, part of the challenge is that when countries hold referenda, let's hold a referendum to decide whether we want two terms or limitless terms. And the referendum is held, and the result is that we don't want term limitations. So the constitution gets changed. So what do you do about that? You might say, I don't like it, but I might say, but it's the will of the people. So I'm saying that things like that, which really ought to be avoided. Now, in terms of specific wrong things that might happen in countries, I don't think they depend on age. I think they depend on the politics of the people concerned. So the qualification you were putting there, especially as they get older, I don't think applies. I think we can do wrong things at any age. So I don't want to us to discuss the politics of Zimbabwe. You meant, because I'm saying that because you mentioned Zimbabwe. I don't want us to go there because we can, if Tsepo here decided that, all right, let's extend our session by 6 hours, 8 hours, then we can. Because again, this is part of what I'm trying to insist on. A proper understanding of what we're dealing with is important. So that we can then come to right conclusions. Not necessarily because this thing has been repeated so many times, therefore it must be true. When I was speaking in Durban yesterday on Zimbabwe, I read a sentence from an article which appeared in one of the South African papers in the last few days. And that sentence says that our government, refused to do what the people of Zimbabwe were demanding, the overthrow of Mugabe. We refused to do that. Therefore, we betrayed the people of Zimbabwe. So I read this thing. There was never, ever a single occasion when the people of Zimbabwe said to us, overthrow Mugabe. Never happened. The people who said they overthrow Mugabe were the British. It was not Zimbabweans. Even the opposition party, the MDC, were the first ones who asked us to intervene with regard to Zimbabwe matters. The MDC said, Changirai, please help us to put us together with the ruling parties and PF so that together as Zimbabweans we can decide on the future of our country. So fine, okay, let's do that. We tried to do that. In the end, they came to an agreement. But I'm saying that you would find statements like that, which have got absolutely no basis in fact, that the people of Zimbabwe wanted us to overthrow Mugabe. But in reality, even if they'd asked us, we would have refused. Because it wouldn't be task of the South African government to go around overthrowing other governments. That's the regime change is somebody else's agenda. I don't think it can be our agenda here. We wouldn't be that kind of country. Tsepo, I think you have answered those questions. Thanks. Yes,
I think we have traversed both the historical, the current, and the future. For IR, what's happening in Zim, and also dealing with Zim, also dealt with the past. I did say earlier that the second round will be special. Any hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's left, my left. I hope all of your questions are not left in their orientation. So it's all ladies. I've noted you, sir, I've noted you. In that order, Ayanda, and then we'll follow my sister.
Former President, it's an honor to be here today and to listen to you speak. In forming Timali, you had a vision for what Africa and what African leadership is all about. Moving 50 years ago, how do you envisage that Africa would be if this project is a success? What kind of leaders should we be having in this continent? What are the attributes and what are the things that they should be able to achieve? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Former President and everybody. My question is on the attacks that was happening in the couple of days. I want to know what is your opinion in the way our current president handled the situation in terms of responding to the situation. Would you have handled it differently if you were the current president?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sanel Mjali. My question to the former president is, sorry, I had it written down here.
Technology.
What is the one mistake, or rather, what is the one characteristic that isn't very great that you have witnessed leaders around you having?
I think I noted hands already, so you are noted, you are noted.
Good afternoon, former president and also the guests. My name is Danielle. I don't think this is much, well, I've got two parts, a comment and a question. Your speech you made 1996 on behalf of the African National Congress, I'm an African, I think that's probably one of the speeches that always resonates with me, especially when I look at the situation that South Africa finds itself in. I think we often forget that we are African. We forget our pride, we forget our struggle, and we forget our liberation. I believe that you can be an optimist and you can be a pessimist. I find that the current situation, we are we're less optimistic than what we should be. And I think it's such not a shame, but a loss, because of the fact that, you know, we've come so far in the struggle for liberation that we often forget to acknowledge our wins, to look at where we are, to look at where we were. And I believe that that's the one thing that we never should forget as South Africans. My question to you is, former President, what is your vision, what is your outlook of the future for South Africa, especially looking at everything that's happening in terms of gender-based violence, in terms of the economy, in terms of the xenophobic attacks that is happening? I'd really like to know what your views are. Thank you.
Good afternoon, former President. Good afternoon, colleagues, esteemed guests. My name is Nolene Tahani. It's a pleasure to meet you again. You conferred my honors degree in economics earlier this year at the University of South Africa. And so my question obviously is economically related. So given the economic tailwinds of our country, the large Gini coefficient that we have, the ever-growing unemployment rate, and the violence that we've seen recently, right? How do we bridge the gap? It's a conversation that's ongoing, but the problems seem to be just getting bigger. And then the second part of my question relates to financial literacy. As a financial advisor, what I've seen is that we lack financial literacy, right, on a very large scale. And the problem is it's not a profitable thing to do, so it's just not getting done. It's not getting done in disadvantaged communities. It's not getting done on a national platform. How do we change that? And then finally, my role as an individual, how do I contribute to being part of the solution as an individual, not associated to any organization? How do I myself contribute to the financial literacy without being a financial advisor associated to PPS? Thank you.
I think there's another hand. Yes, on that row. Somehow somebody sneaked in to ask a question. So, to be yourself and you be last, eh? Yes.
Man. Good afternoon, everybody. Mr. President, former President. My name is Refilwe and I'm from Alex. My question is with regards to African Renaissance. I understand that it was something that you spearheaded in 1997, and somehow it went, and I don't personally know as to where it actually ended up. And last year I read an article on the Mail and Guardian that you were gonna be called back to finish the project, as you were deemed as the person who actually started it and have more knowledge in terms of what is happening in the continent. So my question is, where is it? Is it still coming, or it's something that you're still thinking about it? Because I understand that they said they will ask you to come back and not give you an opportunity to say no.
I'm presuming you're referring to when Mr. Lindiwe Sisulu was
yes.
referring to the for South Africa's foreign policy.
Correct, yes.
All right.
Good afternoon, everyone.
No. We are skipping you for now.
I'll be last.
The lady next to you, yes, her. I promised you next round.
Oh.
Yes.
Good afternoon, former President. My name is Dumi. My question is, with regards to the leadership, specifically in the ANC, we've had a few leaders, Julius Malema, Cyril Ramaphosa, Jacob Zuma, even Robert Mugabe, who've been very divisive in their leadership, in public opinion. They've created negative perceptions. What is the extent of your involvement in the future leadership of the ANC, especially economically?
President, I think I'm going to step aside.
I hope I've written down all of these questions. Somebody asked a question about the recent attacks against his foreign shops and so on, and whether the president handled them correctly and whether I would join him, I would do the same or not do the same. There's the former High Commissioner of Nigeria to South Africa, who went back, finished his tour of duty here and went back to Nigeria last year. Well, let me start off by saying you will remember, of course, that the government of Nigeria and the population have been very upset about what's been happening here, and they've made that thing very clear. Now, I'm coming back to my story. The High Commissioner, he finished his term of duty here last year, went back to Nigeria. And at some point, he gave a speech. He spoke in Nigeria. And he said something which is very important. He said, out of every four Nigerians killed in South Africa, 3 are killed by other Nigerians. And he said it's mainly turf wars around the matter of drugs. Now, I'm saying as a former ambassador of Nigeria to this country, who was saying the story that you are told, that the South Africans are after killing Nigerians is not true. This is a practical reality. As I was saying, that he gave the figure that 3 out of 4 Nigerians were killed in South Africa would be killed by other Nigerians. You see, that raises a question about this matter. As I was saying, if you take the recent attacks, my view, and it's a view, I can't say I've done research to establish this, is that these were organized attacks and not spontaneous. They are organized in order to achieve particular purposes. So you get them in these various portions. Today we are in Guatemala in Springs, another day we are in Jeppestown, another day we are in Alex, and all that. I'm saying it's organized to achieve particular purposes. So if I were the government, that's the first thing I would say. These are organized attacks to achieve particular purposes. The Reverend Mishwe spoke sometime last week, leader of the ACDP, and actually raised a similar question. He said, who are the masterminds? Because if we don't solve that question, these attacks will all occur again. If we come to the conclusion that the population in Dube Township in Soweto is xenophobic, and that's what our problem is, then we have to answer the question, therefore, how do we engage that population in Dube to make sure that it ceases being xenophobic? And I would imagine that if you convene that population of Dube into a hall and said to them, look, I'm bringing you together because I think you are xenophobic, they would stone you. They would say, whoever told you we hate other people because they are other people. I'm saying if we don't find the people behind organizing these attacks, they will recur. Because we're not looking at the real problem objectively. You saw these figures that I've been given about how many people died. 8, 10 or 12 or something. 12? 10 of whom are South African. 2 of whom are Zimbabweans. But the biggest outcry about Nigeria, people being killed, is from Nigeria. I spoke to the premier of the province, David Makura, and I said to him, you know, Premier, my request, can you please ask the provincial police to give a report about who owned the shops that were attacked? I haven't seen that information. As a result of the absence of factual information of this kind, then people create their own stories. Because I was saying to him, Premier Makura, that, you know, I suspect that the people who are attacked are Pakistanis, people from Bangladesh, and people from Somalia. Those might be very well the biggest groups. Then there would be people from other nationalities. So that we get a proper picture. Because part of the story that is put across is that no, this thing is not only xenophobia, it's Afrophobia. These South African Africans hate the other Africans from the rest of the continent. But I'm saying if you looked at the shops, I hope the police will produce the statistics. Which shops were attacked? Who owned and ran the shops? And again, I mean, if you go to many of the African townships, again, something that's established when people look at these matters objectively, that in many instances, this Somali shop in my yard used to be my shop. But I found it more economically rewarding if I lease the shop to a Somali and he pays me rent. So he must stand behind the counter and do all the hustling, get the money, but at the end of the week or month, I get mine. That is our own people who created this kind of space. So I'm saying a proper understanding of this matter is critically required. And I personally don't think that we have, as a country, not just government, I don't think as a country we've really done a proper analysis of this. I was telling you earlier, for instance, about the report done by Judge Pillay, Neva Pillay, about similar attacks in Durban, which I think was in 2015, when she had then had a thorough look at this thing and was able to say this is reality, which means now that you have understood this thing properly, therefore you are able to engage it properly. I think that is, in my view, is that we still need to do some work in order to understand what happened here in these last few days, particularly with regard to the attacks against the shopkeepers in this metro, Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni. I'd also spoken to some other people about what happened when some of the traders chased away the police. And a lot of us, of course, naturally said, but this is wrong, illegal. Of course it was. You can't go around beating up the police. And people correctly said this is wrong. Sure it was. But having said that, you need to ask the question why. Why did they do it? These are these migrant people in this country who are running the shops. And therefore, by definition, very vulnerable. Maybe I can come and say you are undocumented and therefore out or something. Why would people like that, in a very precarious situation objectively, as these non-nationals, why would they attack the police? Let's ask that question. It was a criminal thing to attack the police, correct. But why did they do it? Unfortunately, you remember that particular instance. The police helped us to answer that question. Because even as they were doing those raids, they arrested 8, 9, 10 of their own officers who were trading in counterfeit goods. They go and raid your shop. They raid your shop and they take the counterfeit goods and come back to you to say, buy back your goods. I've been told of instances where quite a lot of the non-nationals are saying that really we wish a situation at our homes was better. Because you get police officers, this is not a condemnation of South African Police Service, some police officers, regularly, I'm talking about a woman who runs a hairdressing shop. Regularly, this officer will come to demand so much money every month. And the poor woman, she knows that if she doesn't give the money, this police officer is going to cook up some story to get her deported. Now I'm saying, I said to somebody, please, can you investigate why those traders in central Johannesburg did a very wrong thing of chasing away the police? There was a reason for it. As I was saying, fortunately, the police helped us to answer that question, because that was part of the reason. Because of a persistent misbehavior by certain members of the South African Police Service who extort bribes from people. And you are obliged to give the bribe. I'm talking about women who say sometimes they are obliged to sleep with these police officers. Because if they don't, they know they are going to be chased out. Why are we not raising these things so that we can act correctly? And that's what I'm saying. You see, it's important, I think, to have an objective understanding of what is happening in this reality so that we know what it is that we need to change. And with regard to the current attacks, I think the first starting point is to answer the question that Bishop Mishwe, Reverend Mishwe put, who are the masterminds? That needs to happen. And I'm saying that question is a question that must be answered, certainly by government, but I think the rest of society as well. When the question asked about mistakes, I'm not so sure it can be answered easily, of people around yourself and so on. There are a number of mistakes. Let's talk about ourselves here. There's clearly a number of mistakes we made. I'm talking about the time we were in government. You remember we used to have technical colleges. I think they're called TVET colleges now. Those colleges, when we got into government, we handed them over to the provinces. They became the special responsibility of the provinces. So the provincial education departments would be in charge of basic education and technical colleges, and national government universities and higher education. During one election campaign, we visited one of these technical colleges in Pretoria. They were doing all sorts of things, electrical things and so on. And the same day we went to the BMW plant in Pretoria, in Roslyn. And as we were talking to the management there, one of the questions we raised was, we hope you people are taking students who are qualifying from that technical college. And they say, yes, we are. But the problem is that we've got to train them from the beginning. So why? Because at the technical college, they are using equipment that is 15 years old, long overtaken by technological development. So by the time they come to us here at BMW, the equipment we use is modern, and they are completely unfamiliar with this. So when the government changed 2009 and President Zuma took over, they took a correct decision, which was to move the technical colleges to national. Because what was happening in the provinces was that as they do their budgets for education, they would budget for primary, secondary school, high school, and if there was anything left over, then it would go to the technical colleges. Now, I'm saying this was an important mistake, bad mistake on our part, because a very important contributor to these very high levels of unemployment in the country is lack of skills. You have lots and lots of people, as we all of us know, who are unemployed, but more tragically are unemployable because they don't have the skills. Now here is an institution, the technical colleges, which should have been producing the skills that are required as part of our response to the question of unemployment. And what we did was to handle them in a manner that they couldn't do this thing that was required of producing the skilled people. Then that was a bad mistake. Attempts to correct it, I hope that they have succeeded. There's been this debate in the country about the land question. Yeah, quite correct. We have to do something about the land issue and so on. But I was saying to some people a couple of weeks back that agriculture in this country accounts for something like 3 or 4% of GDP. 3 or 4% of the wealth of South Africa comes from agriculture. Now, as we discuss the land thing, the way I'm listening to some people, if you don't address this matter of the land redistribution, you are never going to solve these problems of inequality. So I say, you cannot say the overwhelming majority of the population of this country, the African black, must concentrate on the 3% of the wealth of the country and do nothing about the 97. Doesn't make sense. So let's deal with the land question, but let's do it understanding what the objective reality is. Now, say, even if you look at the land restitution process, land claims, up to now, in the majority of cases where people have won their claims to land, they've opted to take money, not land. What conclusion do we draw from that? It might be that it was maybe land in wrong places, which is why people didn't want it. I don't know. But I'm saying the objective reality is that in the majority of successful land claims, the population has opted for money rather than the land. I'm raising this matter because we might make another mistake of thinking that the resolution of the economic challenges of the country, including problems of inequality, unemployment, that the resolution of those questions resides in the resolution of the land question, which would be a very, very wrong conclusion. I don't know where I was where this matter arose. I think it was maybe at Timali. And said, all right, let us assume that things will go ahead and land will be expropriated without compensation. Please, you who are in this room, how many of you agree to be farmers? And nobody raised their hand. They don't want to be farmers. Even here. Oh, there are 2 hands. There's only one. So I'm saying that it's necessary objectively to understand these things correctly. And I'm saying that with this, that I was citing one mistake that we made here. There are probably other mistakes which have to do with an understanding of how a capitalist economy functions. 2-3 years back, the the deputy head of the IMF visited South Africa. And he gave a speech at Wits University, and made a very interesting observation. And he said there are many structural changes which need to take place with regard to the South African economy. But one of the things that needs to happen is that the South African government must understand that there are certain things, certain policies, which if you introduce them in a country like the UK or the US or Germany and so on, will work. But will not work if you introduce them in South Africa. That you must understand that. Therefore, they are wrong policies. Policies which may be right generally somewhere else, but are wrong for South Africa. That needs to be looked at. That's why I'm saying that might have been another mistake, that we didn't understand properly the functioning of a capitalist system here in South Africa. And therefore introduce policies which are going to produce negative results. An example of that, for instance, is we had a long time ago now an international advisory council on the economy. It was made up of senior business people from around the world. There were 2 Americans who sat in that panel committee, and they kept raising a question. And that question was, why are many of the South African corporations, why do they hold such large volumes of assets as cash, abnormally high in terms of international business standards? So each time we met twice a year. And each time we met, they would pose this question. And we kept running away from it. The reason we're running away from it, because we're embarrassed. Because the reason for that was that a lot of your big corporates were uncertain about the future of the country. They proceed from the position that this South Africa, this transition which took place from apartheid to democracy was too good to be true. Sooner or later, something is going to explode. After all, this is an African country. Now, once you put your money in building a factory, you have to run. You have to run because something has exploded. You can't run with the factory. But with the cash you can. Which is why the companies maintained high liquidity rates, because of their uncertainty about the future. Now, what I'm being told now by some people who are more knowledgeable than I, that we're back to the same phenomenon. Among the corporate world, a lot of uncertainty about the future of this country, and one doesn't blame them. And the consequence is, let us take as many of our assets out of the country as possible, because we don't know what's going to happen here. So the IMF man was saying, when you introduce particular policies to impact on South African capitalist economy, don't expect that necessarily it will behave in the same way as would happen in the UK or the US. And he was right. And part of the reason was exactly that the sentiment of the business community here about the future of the country would be different. once, that's one last thing about this. Once I traveled with, I was flying to England, I don't know why. And I was from here, wearing a suit and a tie. And I don't know, somebody must have bought a ticket because I was in business class. And then next to me was a German who was wearing jeans. And he told me that, no, he is in the construction industry. So I come to the conclusion, given the way he's dressed, that maybe he is a salesman in the construction industry. But as we're getting close to landing in London, he tells me a story. He says, you know, we, as business people, were faced with a particular challenge when the reunification of Germany took place. Because Helmut Kohl was Chancellor. Helmut Kohl would call us in and say, there's a company so-and-so in East Germany, which is in crisis. You've got to take it over, invest in it, rebuild it, keep people employed, and we would have to do that. So I said, I'm very interested in this. He says, because it was a national task. The reunification of Germany was a national task. So even us as business people, when we're instructed by the government to make our own contribution to that, we would do that. And so in the end, he says, well, for instance, in my case, I was summoned, and so I'm beginning to say to myself, he can't be a salesman. He's, no, the chap was the owner of a big building firm in Germany. And that's how they behaved. There's a national task. The reunification of Germany affects all Germans. But here, if we say they are national tasks to eradicate poverty, will we all respond in the same way? So I'm saying that must have been a mistake also, that we didn't quite understand the functioning of the capital system here in South Africa, and therefore acted in ways that were not quite right. But I think the point that is made that we need to be a bit more optimistic about our future is correct. It's correct because I think if my own interaction with our own population here, black and white, indeed is many say overwhelming majority of South Africans are very positive about this country and very committed to make it succeed. I'm sure you people here at PPS are exactly of the same mind. So I think that we've got a sufficient pool of brains, of skill, of whatever that we need to make sure that we do make a success of the country. But again, I come back to this matter that it's very important that we understand what it is, the nature of the problem. The 70% went a few years ago, let me say 10 years ago, or more, probably 80%, 85% of violent crimes against the person. That would include rape, that would include murder, it would include assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Those sorts of offenses occurred between Friday evening and Monday morning. Over 80%. I think in the latest crime statistics, they say it's 70%. So you can tell, just looking at those figures, where the source is of this. I'm talking just now about crimes against a person. They are very, very closely related to abuse of alcohol and drugs in the poorest areas of our country. Inevitably. I'm telling too many stories today. Once I was in Finland, and the Prime Minister of Finland organized a dinner with the corporate chiefs of Finland, including people from Nokia, Finnair, and big companies. And they raised a question about crime in South Africa. So fortunately, I had been looking at the crime figures. So I was saying to them, sure, there are high levels of crime, but you've got to try and understand and break these figures down. So I said to them, you see, for instance, if you go to Rosebank in Johannesburg, you are not going to be robbed as you're walking down the street. The problem you'll have in Rosebank is housebreaking and theft, which will occur in many instances when you are not in a house. And then you'll have breaking into businesses. But these other crimes of murder and so on are not likely. So, but if you go to other areas of Johannesburg, yes, indeed. So two of these business people, they say, well, it's very interesting. I was still Deputy President. It's very interesting, Deputy President, that you say that, because each time I'm in Johannesburg, I stay at the Hyatt in Rosebank. And I walk around and nothing has ever happened to me. Another one joins that. And so the Prime Minister says, then why did you ask the Deputy President about crime? When in fact, your own experience is that you've never experienced it. The ambassador of Finland was there. So he says he had hired a South African lawyer. Not hired him, but on, what we call it, on retain. And retained this lawyer because I know for a fact that these Finnish visitors who are coming here as tourists, as business people, are going to be affected by this crime. So we have this lawyer ready to go and intervene. And he says this man has been with us now for 10 months and has really only dealt with one case. So again, the Prime Minister says, but you must explain. The man says, the ambassador, he says, no, there is a Finnish fellow who was arrested for fraud, charged, found guilty, sentenced, is serving a sentence. Now he wants to be released to prison in Finland and maintains contact with this lawyer of ours. Say, please, can you intervene with the South African government to transfer me to prison in Finland? But please, not during the Finnish winter. So the ambassador says that's really all the cases dealt with. In 10 months. Well, no, apart from the usual Finnish cases. So they all laugh. So I don't know the usual Finnish cases. So they then explain, they say, no, you see, the part of the challenge in Finland that alcohol is very expensive. It's deliberate government policy to discourage drinking. So when they get to South Africa, it's holiday time. So they all get arrested for drunkenness in the street and they cool down in the prison cells. And so they then say, no, this thing that the reason we ask Prime Minister this question is because that's what the South Africans tell us. And the South Africans would tell us, you must be very careful, there's a lot of crime and this and that and the other, and we respond to that. It's not that we, as Finns, have had that kind of experience. But I'm again coming to this point. When we say 70% of this kind of crime occurs over weekends in the poorest areas of the country, what's our response? Is it policing? Let's put more police on the beat. At some point, we engage the churches. And we think to the churches that they actually have the most extensive network in these areas affected by this kind of crime. All the various denominations. They will all have a church in this township. Why, on the weekends, what are the priests doing? Because the priests matters that are going to occur, and people come out of these taverns, or shebeens, or places like that. Are we interacting with this population? Well, we were discussing that matter with the churches as to how we might respond to that, to use an institution like that to impact in these areas of very high crimes of a particular kind. The only thing I'm trying to urge all the time is a proper understanding of what we're up to, the nature of the challenge we face, so that we're then able to respond correctly. And I think on that basis, it is really possible to be optimistic about the future of the country. I think that relates to the matter of the Renaissance. The word Renaissance, as you know, it really means rebirth. And that's what we're trying to communicate, that it is possible. We have to strive for the rebirth of the continent. Rebirth means attend to everything. Matters of culture, matters of economy, matters of education, matters of everything. That let's all, as Africans, say that this is the Africa we want. That reborn Africa, this is the Africa we want, and let's strive to get it. It was out of that perspective that, for instance, you had economic programs which we worked on, like what became NEPAD, the new Partnership for Africa's Development, out of which came things like the African peer review system, so that we could sit together as Africans and review ourselves to say you are misbehaving. It is the correct way to treat things like this. It was out of all of that. Those institutions remain. Like I'm taking NEPAD, peer review mechanism, they remain, they're still there. Well, quite what they are doing is something else. But I think it is possible. One of the problems, I think, the challenges that we face on the continent, you can see it in terms of what has happened. There used to be a very strong and very active All-African Students' Union, which involved all of these African universities and very active young people at universities, concerned about education on the continent, about other challenges on the continent. That organization has died. There was the All-African Conference of Churches, still there. Used to be very active, very visible. The voice of the church in terms of the future of the continent, very strong. But over the years, it disappeared virtually. Similarly, you had an All-African Trade Union Council. Is dead. Women's organization, same, has died. There's a particular voice on the continent which used to be very strong and very vibrant, which was about this renaissance of the continent, with us acting together as Africa, as Africans, to produce this Africa we want. That voice has died. We don't discuss this matter enough. And I think in the majority of cases, people are not even aware of it. So the capacity that we had as a continent to take the continent forward kind of vanished. And so, therefore that voice we spoke about in African Renaissance, I think has become very, very weak. Something has to be done about that. I was never going to be recalled to do anything about it. But continuously, this is the work that we do. We try to do even this foundation. Our foundation must try and focus on that matter. We know we have one of the things that we decided, the foundation decided, was to establish what is called a presidential library. So work has started. We're doing it together with UNISA, and work has started on that. So all of the papers have accumulated over many decades are being digitized and so on. So we are collecting this because there's a huge volume of knowledge here in the country, elsewhere on the continent, which in the past we have lost. For instance, even now, if you want to find a lot of the material concerning our own struggle here, from whenever, you'll find the bulk of that material is in the United States, not here. So we decided, no, let's correct that. This month, I hope, we are going to receive the Kwame Nkrumah archive, because what had happened was that Kwame Nkrumah's personal assistant, when Nkrumah got overthrown, he was in China. He got overthrown. The PA then made sure that she collected all his personal material, all of it. And when he came back from China, he went to Guinea, Conakry, and passed away in Conakry. And she collected material from Conakry. So this old lady has been holding this material for decades. She was in England. She passed away last year and handed over this Nkrumah archive to her son. The son decides this year that he is going to hand over this archive to the British Library. Now, the British Library is a very big library. It's a state library. It's very good, but he's going to hand over this material. Fortunately, the editor of the New African who's a Ghanaian, he gets an invitation to the ceremony where the British Library would be receiving the Nkrumah archive. And he immediately goes to see the man who's going to hand over the material to say to him, no, but you can't. This material belongs to Ghana. or Africa generally, not to the British. So in the end, to cut a long story short, he talks to us, the editor of the New African, and we contact the man who's in control, who owns the Nkrumah archive. We say to him, look, we're setting up a presidential library. We believe the material should come here. Even if we hold it in custody for the Ghanaians. Unfortunately, he immediately agreed. So that's why the material should be here this month. So I'm mentioning that to say that I'll give an example of some of the work that the foundation is doing with regard to that renaissance. Because there's lots of material around, never mind South Africa, around the continent, which doesn't have a home. So as part of our contribution to making sure that this pool of African knowledge has a home, is preserved, and people have got access to it, that's something we can do. So at least I'm saying that the notion of optimism about the future of the continent, I agree with very fully. And in that context, I think the matter of the Renaissance becomes important. Let me just finish. The questions about leaders, future leaders, including about the economy, what kind of leaders in 50 years' time, matters about financial literacy and what people can do. Generally, this leadership question. I think clearly what is being done here at PPS is very important in terms of answering that question. Or at Timali. The need for us to prepare the people, to give the people the necessary skills that are required in various fields. But I believe that we also need to say that people are not only technicians, so that you don't only have skills that are specific to your profession. To be able to play this leadership role, I think requires a broader exposure. When I was doing my master's degree in England in economics, my professor was Professor Bana, Tibo Bana. Tibo Bana, originally Hungarian, was a global world expert on input-output tables, material that is used in planning commissions. So he then says that he persuaded me to do a master's degree. So I said, okay. So I said, now, Professor, one of the things I want to therefore to do in this master's is this planning thing, this capacity for economic planning, taking advantage of the fact that he is there. So he refused. He said, not you. And Professor Bana says to me, look, you people here in South Africa are in struggle. One day you are going to be free. And I'm pretty certain that you are going to be in some leading position. Your task is not to understand input-output tables. Your task is to understand how societies change. So that's what you need to study. Because for this thing about input-output table, you will hire somebody. You will pay somebody who can do that. Your task is to help to bring about the social change. So, therefore, when you do the MA, why don't you look at matters like anthropology, society, sociology, things like that, so that you understand how. So that's what we had to do. The point I'm trying to make is that this leadership issue is not only about skills, technical skills in whatever the profession, but the capacity to lead also requires the need to understand this wider society. Like this question here, it seems quite clear that over the years since 1994, one of the things that has happened here is an increasing incidence of disrespect for the law, an increasing incidence of criminal behavior. It might express itself sometimes in simple forms. Municipal workers go on strike. It's perfectly their right to do so, to demand wages, better conditions, and all that. But then they litter the streets, they take bins, and why do you do that? Or people in Vuwani, in Limpopo, because there's a problem about a municipal boundary. We don't want to be this side, we want to be that side. And they burn down schools. I'm saying an understanding of this. What is the cause for this increase in criminality? I think I was listening yesterday to the news that there's some problem at the University of Zululand, and they went and burnt down a police station. And you say, but what causes this thing? You can't have recent figures. The figures show increases in crimes of violence against women. Why is that? It's a wrong thing. It's a very bad thing. Why is it happening? I'm saying it's occurring in the context of a larger problem. Now, we need, among other things, therefore, a leadership to emerge which is able to deal with those kinds of situations. So I think the initiative of PPS, Timali, to try and cultivate a leadership, which I'm saying is not only a leadership because of the particular skills it has, but because it's got a leadership because it can help to impact in sense of changing society for the better. Now, I don't know what an individual can do in order to improve financial literacy, a question that was posed, but I would imagine that challenges of that kind are better dealt with through organized structures rather than individual interventions, I would imagine. But in the end, I think we have a responsibility to produce a leadership here at home on the continent, a leadership really that would be able to lead the country, the continent, out of the problems we are experiencing now. Because I think as I was saying, we have the intellectual capacity, and I think we have the will to produce that kind of leadership, which would make sure that indeed this vision of South Africa and Africa reborn, that renaissance actually takes place. I think we can do it, and in any case, I think we must. See, are we not running out of time? Thanks a lot, Seb.
We indeed are running out of time. I'm going to keep my promise and allow you, sir, to ask a question, and Dr. Soga will then close the round of questions for us. I think that's a fair thing, eh? We have been fed.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the
Okay,
panel.
very short, ne? Very short.
Yeah.
President, you don't have to stand.
Yes.
And very short, please.
Yeah.
Not complex question, ne?
Don't worry. My name is Mbegezeli Mapena. Actually, I think with my question, you can feel free to even respond on Twitter some other time later. The afternoon has been long. I think most of us are a bit tired. I think about a month before the xenophobic attack started, a documentary came out on Netflix about Cambridge Analytica. And SCL, the company that is probably the SCL Group, the one that runs them from America. And they were cited as the ones who got Trump into the office, Donald Trump into the office, and the Brexit movement. And anyway, long story short, the behavior that this company uses seemed very evident again when you look at our xenophobic attacks that have been taking place over the past few days. They flood you with videos and media just to get everyone thinking in the same way and in the same mind, only to find that their work is over and above that. They also interfere with elections, and apparently we've been working with them since '94, according to media, the media view, so to speak. So maybe the former president can give us some light on that, what he thinks in terms of that, and whether we should be worried about our democracy as South Africa, given the fourth industrial revolution coming in. I'm sure almost everyone in the room has a smartphone, and if we can be manipulated through these devices in how we vote, in how we think, in how we respond to the same social issues we've been discussing this afternoon, I think that's something of interest.
Thank you very much for food for thought. We will take it as food for thought, and Dr. Swaka will make closing comments for this, and then you will do a vote of thanks for us. I'm told that we have completely run out of time. We could do summaries of the vote of thanks.
No, the problem is we must apologize. We have a delegation from Sussex University in England. They are coming to see us this afternoon, I think at 5 o'clock or something. Or is it 5:30? It's now. No, because we have to engage them to see what it is they can help to contribute in terms of addressing our challenges. There's a delegation from England, from the university, which is here. We have to see them this afternoon. But I'm told it's actually the appointment is now. So that's why we're saying we've run out of time.
Yeah. Yes.
Sure, we are so privileged. Really, I think you will all agree that, it has been an absolute awesome afternoon, that we have had the privilege and honor to have former President Mbeki here. I will try to be short. But and I don't think you can summarize this afternoon. It has just been that powerful, For me, one of the big things that has occurred in me is that, it's interrogated, I think, a lot of our common beliefs and what we believe from media without interrogating further. And a good session or a good education, the result of that is if you come out as a different person. I hope for a lot of us, I certainly am walking away with a different view of the world and what I take in and what I easily consume and believe as fact versus reality. I think for me, that's just been the theme of today. We are a socially relevant organization, which is why the focus on youth. We know about the unemployment challenge in the country. The most often talked about number is 29%, but we know that that number amongst the youth is much higher. It's about 50% or thereabouts, which is why we continue to invest in graduate interns. We continue to invest through the foundation with the bursaries. We continue to partner with the universities in terms of all sorts of support that we do for them. And that is something we are absolutely going to continue to do. Because, we often say that the challenges of this country are too big to be left to be governed alone. So there is a big part of corporates like PPS, as we are doing, to play our part. So very happy about, these kinds of interventions, the graduate program, and now the Young Leadership Forum as well. The organization has about 2/3 of its staff under 35 years. So we actually are a young organization. So it was natural and necessary, really, that we should have something, young people starting to advise the EXCO and starting to help us with some of the questions that we are battling with. So thank you again for the Young Leadership Forum. I think we should round of applause for getting us here. Many reasons why we do this. You know, our staff have to keep telling us that, you know, we want you, develop me. We want to be leaders. Develop me through fulfilling job experiences, formal and informal. They're asking for a diverse, inclusive, efficient work environment, which rewards performance. So I think, hopefully, I hope you walk away from here believing that this is one way of us getting there. I mean, I think this is a true example of one, we keep saying that we see ourselves as a thought leader as PPS. I think today has been by far an example of thought leadership at another level, at a corporate level, and an example of people development and leadership development for all of us. As I say, I really hope we're all coming out as different people. You know, the partnership with Timali and UNISA has been going on for just about 3 years now. It's a partnership that we value. The learners in the program speak highly of it. You see the content. It's very compelling content, you know. It's been a joy, you know, through the foundation, working with UNISA in terms of their interactions, always meticulous, always professional, always willing to come. I mean, the fact that they actually run the lectures here, and as you know, students don't have to actually go to Pretoria. Once again, though, I think I want to thank our CEO, Isaac Smith, for making these opportunities possible for all of us. It is not a small thing. I know he's quite modest about these things, but it really is not a small thing. You know, we don't take it lightly how privileged we are. I want to thank the UNISA leadership and Timali leadership for making this possible and, you know, availing yourselves and your corporation. The PPS executive committee members, PPS graduates sitting here, the Young Leadership Forum, the PPS leadership at all levels. You know that in PPS we talk about people as leaders in whichever space that they are in. I'm looking for the gifts. Okay. We're going to give our esteemed guests to really thank them. Again, former president, our patron of Timali, and the UNISA Chancellor, Mr. Thabo Mbeki. If you can please humbly accept. I think the gifts will be for President Mbeki and for Professor Kamga and for Tebo. Really for the awesome afternoon. I don't think, you know, it is beyond, it was beyond our expectation the afternoon. I think let me start with Professor Kamga. Just checking that we've got them. So, I'm sorry, let me start with him. Yes.
Oh, you start with
yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. And this is for President Mbeki. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We'll have to do a bit of a to and fro here. This is for you. Thank you very much. Thank you as well to the special thanks to the organizing committee. I think you can imagine how the complexity and the amount of detail that goes into arranging an event such as this. You would have seen today, you know, roads were closed, entrances were closed. It's a small inconvenience, I think, for the benefit that we've had. I mean, I think after today, it was no inconvenience at all. So to the organizing committee, Ayanda, Subhashni, Dawn, at some point they were standing here, I'm not seeing them anymore. Dawn, Lorinda, Kumbu, Tulu, Lorraine, Samani, Teresa, Andre, I'm hoping you're all here, but really a huge, sincere thanks to all of you and to the various media houses that are here today, that are covering the event. The teamwork and the collaboration, I know that has been amazing, a true hallmark of doing things the PPS way. We really appreciate your time and effort, and many, many thanks. And last but not least, thanks to all of you for being the gracious audience that you are, that we have been, for your engaging, very thought-provoking questions and deliberations, and again in true PPS style, because we are curious, we are hungry. So this was perfectly how we would have wanted it to be. That brings us to the end of our day. In terms of the order of events from here, we are going to remain seated while we allow our esteemed guests to leave. And then we have provided snacks because it has been a long afternoon. If you use this exit through to the conservatory, for all of us, there will be snacks. However, if I can ask the graduates, the Young Leadership Forum, and EXCO to stay behind in this room. But for all of us, if we can grab a bite in the conservatory. Thank you very much.
Please do remain seated as President Becky leaves the room. Please do remain seated. Doc, Prof.